Well, here we are. Excuse me. This weather, honestly, and this atmosphere, what on earth is going on? Trying to reconnect? Don't tell me we're going through this again. Well, upward and onward. Tonight, I want to bring you two separate pieces. The first is by Robert Morley, and he was an English actor who enjoyed a lengthy career in both Britain and the United States. In The African Queen, at the start of the movie, he was Katharine Hepburn's missionary brother who was murdered, which precipitated her journey with Humphrey Bogart in the film. And he did so many. And of course, for some years, he was the spokesman for British Airways in their television commercials. So this is by Robert Morley, and it's entitled, Fame is the Spur. There are actors who shrink from recognition, playing a perpetual game of hide and seek. Alec Guinness, Paul Scofield, Elizabeth Taylor. No one, I told the latter, will know you in Leningrad. Put a scarf over your hair and come for a walk, or come downstairs and dine with me in the hotel restaurant. The Russians stood on their chairs to get a better view. Miss Taylor ate very little. If there is any chance of my not being recognized, I stand on the chair. For everyone who can put a name to the face, there are 10 who can't. These are the ones who ask for autographs. Mine is not the most legible signature, especially when scrawled on a newspaper in pencil. I leave them to puzzle it out. Some prefer to continue guessing and expect me to halt until they have succeeded. Don't tell me, they will urge. I'll be there in a moment. I have to be there sooner than that, I reply. That's right, they tell me, Christopher Morley. And we part friends. Not all my colleagues enjoy such interruptions. They have other and more serious purposes in life than being quizzed or being told by strangers that the last time he or she met them was on a plane bound for Jersey 15 years ago. I don't suppose you'll remember, they add for further identification, they were plumb out of gin. It is, of course, always impossible to recall the incident, but I, for one, go on my way sustained by the hope that we shall meet again 15 years from now, and one of us be sufficiently. Only on racecourses do I refuse to autograph. Alistair Sim, among others, always refused to give them. He would explain at considerable length his objections to such a foolish request. He refused to litter the world with idiotic scraps of paper. Nowadays, his signature is valuable. For some reason, the Germans and the Americans are the most avid autograph collectors. They write from Italy, enclosing international tokens and a half-dozen blank sheets. I never sign more than one. If, as one supposes, the sender is commercially oriented, one doesn't want to flood the market. Now and again, you will be shaken by the hand by someone who knows your brother in Orpington. The fact that, to the best of your knowledge, you haven't a brother carries the stranger departs, convinced you are lying, and that you are estranged from your relative. You depart wondering if, as in the case of a theatrical friend, your father kept the existence of an entirely separate brood a secret. My friend was tempted to investigate further the chance remark of a bookseller and discovered he had not one, but several brothers and sisters, or more correctly, half-brothers and sisters. But in my case, I have been content to let sleeping dogs lie. Occasionally, unpleasant anonymous gifts through the post. I tell myself that it is unlikely that the former were contaminated by plague, and that I have reduced the intolerable pressure on some fellow lunatic. I refuse to accept it as a judgment on my performance. The older one grows, the more pleased are one's contemporaries to see one, although not necessarily performing in the theater. They are heartened by such encounters. There is a strong geriatric bond. Some recall how well one looks. Others, an occasion many years ago when they first caught sight of one across the footlights. They strive to remember the name of the piece, or the date, or where they were at the time. It is often recall. One hesitates to prompt, even if one could. The parting is delayed but pleasurable. They go on their way remembering something entirely different. How fond they were of Aunt Maud, who provided the matinee treat. One is left with the name of the leading lady on the tip of one's tongue. Americans make the best fans, perhaps because they always seem to have time on their hands. The native young pound along behind, thrust a cigarette packet into one's hand, and are off back to the shop. Worst of all are the temporarily incapacitated who demand you sign the plaster. I find it well nigh impossible to scratch on plaster of Paris, but others seem to manage. Few ask for themselves. It is usually for a child. My little granddaughter will be so pleased, they urge. But surely a candy bar or a toy is a more suitable present. I can hardly bear to contemplate the disappointment. Guess what Grandpa has for you? The small victim searching the pocket and coming up with the signature of someone of whom she is totally ignorant. Don't cry, dear, and Grandpa will go out right away and bring back an iced lolly. New Zealanders often produce passports. There is a certain satisfaction in writing on an official document. The suspicion that in doing so I may have invalidated it doesn't seem to occur to them, as it does to me, that at least people don't seem to want to write their names on me as they do on other ancient monuments. And I am. Heavier citizens demand that I should follow them, to be introduced to their wives on the grounds that the latter often remark on our striking resemblance. Functioning as I do as a sort of decoy duck for British Airways, I am hailed as a friendly counselor whose advice has been accepted for delays at Heathrow. Sometimes asked if I ever resent being better known for performances in television advertisements than as the definitive Hamlet of my time. No, I tell them bravely, in the world of commercials, everything ends happily. And that is precisely what I aim to do. Of course, it has not been so easy for the children, and now the grandchildren, who are at times appalled by my constant bonhomie. My son once summed it all up. There are times, Papa, when you made us cringe a little, but taking it by and large, we got the service. Morley. It was wonderful. And now, a piece by Calvin Trillin entitled Dinner at the De La Rentas. First, let me tell you about a little bit about Calvin Trillin. Trillin, however, Calvin Trillin is an American journalist, memoirist, food writer, poet, and novelist. Winner of the Thurber Prize for American Humor, he is an elected member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. And so by Calvin Trillin, Dinner at the De La Rentas. Another week has passed without even that overstates my standing. Until I read in the New York Times Magazine a couple of weeks ago about the De La Rentas having become barometers of what constitutes fashionable society. Françoise and Oscar de la Renta have created a latter-day salon for le nouveau grand monde, the very rich, very powerful, and very gifted. I wasn't even aware of what I wasn't being invited to, week after week. Once I knew, of course, it hurt. Every time the phone rang, I thought it must be Mrs. de la Renta with an invitation. Mr. Trillin, Françoise de la Renta here. We're having a few very rich, very powerful, and/or very gift-celebrated Chishabov. This was in 1896. I was making a second visit to the United States. We thought you and the missus might like to join us. The phone rang. It was my mother calling from Kansas City to ask if I'm sure I sent a thank you note to my cousin Edna for the place setting of Stainless. Edna and 6 other cousins went in on for our wedding gift in 1965. The phone rang. An invitation. Fats Goldberg, the pizza baron, asked if we'd like to bring the kids to his uptown branch Sunday night to sample the sort of pizza he regularly did dance. Thanks, Fats person, but I'll have to phone you, I said. We may have another engagement Sunday. The phone quit ringing. Why aren't I in le nouveau grand monde? I asked my wife, Alice. Because you speak French with a Kansas City accent? She asked in return. Not at all, I said. Sam Spiegel, the Hollywood producer, is a regular at the De La Rentas, and I hear that the last time someone asked him to speak French. Why would you want to go there anyway? Alice said. Didn't you read that the host is so phony, he added his own de la to what had been plain old Oscar Renter? Who can blame a man for not wanting to go through life sounding like a taxi driver, I said. Family background's not important in Le Nouveau Grand Monde. Diana Vreeland says Henry Kissinger is the star. He worships intelligence. You get invited by accomplishment. Taking over a perfume company, maybe. Or invading Cambodia. Why don't we just call Fats and tell him we'll be there for a gourmet tap dance, Alice said. Maybe it would help if you started wearing dresses designed by Oscar de la Renta, I said. Some of his guests say they would feel disloyal downing Mrs. D's chicken fricassee while wearing someone else's merchandise. Alice shook her head. Oscar de la Renta designs the fat girl made a bad mistake wearing to the prom, she said. Things were a lot easier when fashionable society was limited to old rich goyim, and all the rest of us didn't have to worry about being individually rejected, I said. At least they knew better than to mingle socially with their dressmakers, Alice said. Would I be ready if the De La Rentas phoned? The novelist Jerzy Kosinski, after all, told the Times that evenings with him were intellectually challenging. Henry Kissinger, the star himself, said that the De La Rentas set an interesting intellectual standard. Although, come to think of it, that phrase could also be applied to Fats Goldberg. Alone at my dinner table chit-chat, looking first to the person I imagined being seated on my left, the Comtesse de Ribe, who finds it charming that her name reminds me of barbecue joints in Kansas City. And then to the person on my right, Barbara Walters, another regular, who has tried to put me at my ease by confessing that in French she doesn't do her R's terribly well. I was encouraged when it leaked that the Reagan cabinet was going to be made up of successful managers from the world of business, I say, but I expected them all to be Japanese. Barbara and the Vicomtesse smile. Alice, who has just walked into the kitchen, looks concerned. Read in the Times that Mrs. de la Renta is very strict about having only one of each sort of person at a dinner party. Maybe they already have someone from Kansas City. Possible. Jerzy Kosinski mentioned that Mrs. D is so careful about not including more than one stunning achiever from each walk of life. She understands that every profession generates. He and Norman Mailer have never been at the de la Rentas on the same evening. When I arrive, I like to think that as a novelist, I'm unique. Only one fabulous beauty, only one world-class clothes horse. Then I realized that the one of each rule could work to my advantage. As I envisioned it, Henry Kissinger phones Mrs. D only an hour before dinner guests are to arrive. He had been scheduled to pick up $15,000 that night for explaining SALT II to the Vinyl Manufacturers Association convention in Chicago, but the airports are snowed in. Come to dinner after all. How marvelous, darling, Mrs. D says. She hangs up and suddenly looks stricken. My God, she says to Oscar, what are we going to do? We already have one war criminal coming. What to do, except to phone the man who conflicts with the star and tell him the dinner had to be called off because Mr. D had come down with a painful skin disease known as the 7th Avenue Spilkis. What to do about the one male place at the table, now empty, between Vicomtesse de Ribes and Barbara Walters? The phone rings. This is Françoise de la Renta, the voice says. Trillin, I say. I'll be right over. Oh, my. Such fun. Oh, my dears. I keep getting that message that this is not going through, trying to reconnect. So I'm going to hold it here because I don't know if this is coming across or not. And I guess the only thing to do is once again to call Spectrum and say, help, get over here. I don't know what's causing this. I hope it's going through. I hope you've been able to watch and to hear it clearly. Meanwhile, I'll try to clear my throat. This weather is just really difficult. But anyway, I hope you all are well. I hope you're happy. And I hope I don't see that trying to reconnect message anymore. You just hit again. So, thank you, my dears. Oh, I hope to see you next week. Bye now.